Smoking is an amazing phenomenon. Everyone knows that it is harmful, but many people still start and continue this habit. In this video, I will tell you about the insidious nature of smoking and present 10 interesting facts about tobacco. Tobacco is an amazing plant from the Solanaceae family, a distant relative of the potato and tomato. In Latin, this small shrub is called Nicotiana tabacum. There are more than 70 species of tobacco in the world. The chemical composition of the plant contains a psychoactive substance, nicotine. This alkaloid has a mildly stimulating and addictive effect on the body. The native land of tobacco is considered South America. The American Indians became acquainted with this plant 6,000 years ago and began to grow it. Indian shamans used tobacco smoke for magical rituals and ceremonies to protect from evil spirits and to communicate with ancestors. The Indians chewed tobacco leaves to cure their teeth and made healing ointments and decoctions from them. They believed that tobacco juice brought good luck on the hunt, boosted morale before war, and helped defeat enemies in battle. War ended with the smoking of a peace pipe, when the Indians sat in a circle under a tree, passed the pipe from hand to hand, and sucked in the sacred smoke. Smoking was customary to seal deals and treaties because a word made while smoking could not be broken, and the spirits would see to it that the promise was kept. At the end of the 15th century, European colonists first landed on an island in the New World during an expedition led by Christopher Columbus. While exploring new lands, the expeditioners noticed an interesting ritual of the local natives. The natives wrapped dry leaves of a plant in rolls, lit them on fire, and inhaled the smoke. The Indians called such tobacco rolls tobacco. Columbus and his companions were treated to these tobaccos. After some time, the members of the expedition returned to Spain, bringing back with them new species of animals and plants, including dried bundles of tobacco leaves. Columbus's name remains in history not only for the discovery of the New World, but also as the name of the man who taught the whole world to smoke tobacco. The use of tobacco spread quickly, first among the Spanish colonists, and during the 16th century became a habit among the people of Europe, France, Spain, Portugal, and England. At the same time, there were rumors about tobacco's miraculous health benefits. It is interesting that it was doctors who initially promoted the popularization of smoking. One of the first was Spanish botanist and physician Nicolas Monares, who in his scientific work New Plants of the World and Healing Plants of America recognized tobacco leaves as an effective remedy for a variety of diseases. This work became the inspiration for the tobacco literature that followed. Stomach cramps, inflammation, syphilis, and even cancer were suggested to be treated with products derived from tobacco leaves. Another curious fact is connected with the name of the French ambassador Jean Nicot. This man brought tobacco to France, and later tobacco got its Latin name Nicotiana, as derived from his name. Under his leadership, Queen Catherine de' Medici of France began using snuff as a cure for migraines. The French court used it to treat stomach disorders, bone aches, and toothaches. Information about the harms of tobacco did not appear until the middle of the 19th century, but nobody paid much attention to it at that time. Research was carried out by individual doctors, but in the first third of the 20th century, more and more data began to appear that smoking causes cancer and many other diseases. Since then, there has been more and more information about the negative effects of smoking. Tobacco was brought from America to Europe by trade routes. Tobacco spread around the world, and the fashion for its use gained momentum. In 1636, in the Spanish city of Seville, appeared a tobacco company producing cigars. Tobacco for them was brought from Cuba, and Cuban cigars were considered the most noble representative of tobacco products. Around the same time, the first cigarettes appeared. One version has it that factory workers collected cigar cuttings and wrapped them in paper. According to another version, tobacco and cigar merchant Philip Morris of London was the first to invent cigarettes when he saw a military man rolling a small cigar. The Philip Morris factory became one of the most famous tobacco companies, producing brands of cigarettes such as Bond, Chesterfield, LM, Parliament, and a hit, smokeless tobacco heating system, IECO. In parallel with the development of tobacco plantations and industries in China, Great Britain, Indonesia, and Japan, people smoked tobacco for over 200 years, unaware of its health risks. After the first confirmed studies on the negative effects of nicotine on the body, the first anti-tobacco sentiment and recommendations to ban smoking in transport and other public places appeared. Tobacco companies denied in every possible way the harmful effects of smoking and prevented the dissemination of this information. Therefore, regulation of consumption was introduced at the state level. In 1965 in Great Britain, television advertising of tobacco and tobacco products was banned, and in 1971, a similar ban was adopted in the USA. In the 1980s, smoking in public places was greatly restricted, and many lawsuits were brought against tobacco companies for health damage caused by smoking. The companies were accused of knowing about the negative effects of smoking for a long time, but hiding it and trying to falsify scientific research. Tobacco companies continued to use illegal marketing techniques. For example, they produced candy and gum in the form of cigarettes that looked like real cigarettes, but were intended for children. In this way, companies tried to create a loyal attitude to tobacco products and to accustom children to a certain brand of cigarettes in order to raise a new generation of potential consumers. After the first information about the dangers of smoking, many smokers wanted to give up the habit, but the owners of tobacco companies began to use filters and present them as protection against the negative effects of smoking. Manufacturers of Kent brand cigarettes began making filters out of asbestos and touting the new safe way to smoke. Over time, such marketing techniques were banned in many countries. The tobacco industry is booming and reaches its peak at the end of the 19th century. Simultaneously, advertising is appearing, the purpose of which is to create a positive image of the smoker and to reinforce the view of the health benefits of smoking. It is hard to believe, but not so long ago, Marlboro cigarette advertising was aimed at pregnant women and women who want to lose weight. The advertisers were guided by a simple logic. Nicotine reduces appetite, speeds up the metabolism, and therefore helps control weight gain. The advertising for Marlboro cigarettes attracted not only images of women and children. To sound more convincing, tobacco companies exploited the image of doctors. People in white coats smiled from magazine covers and blew smoke. And Lucky Strike ads told that this brand of cigarettes helped with coughing because it didn't irritate the mucous membranes. In addition, the product was positioned not only as a stress reliever, but also as a way to impress the opposite sex. One of these companies became iconic for many generations. Thus was born the famous Marlboro Cowboy, a symbol of masculinity and strength. Often famous athletes, showmen, and actors appeared in cigarette advertisements. In a poster from around 1950, Ronald Reagan, then an actor and later President of the United States, convinces viewers that Chesterfield cigarettes are the best gift. He says, "This is the happiest Christmas for smokers that there could be. Chesterfields have gone soft and got rid of the unpleasant aftertaste." A big role in the popularization of tobacco products was played by the cinema. Cigarettes became part of the fashion image. Many celebrities smoked both on screen and in person. Marlene Dietrich and Marilyn Monroe were among such stars. Some major tobacco corporations even signed contracts with Hollywood to promote cigarettes in movies. Another turn in the development of the tobacco industry was World War II. Along with cereals and other foodstuffs, tobacco was part of soldiers' rations and a basic necessity at the front. Tobacco served as a stress reliever, blunted feelings of hunger, and was a kind of currency. No one thought about the destructive consequences of smoking because death by bullet was much closer. Ordinary soldiers from the Soviet Army made self-smokes and stuffed them with tobacco, a waste product from tobacco production that is not normally used to make cigarettes. Officers got the more prestigious cigarettes, such as Kazbek and Bellamorcanal. The American Allies also considered tobacco a product of strategic importance. Tobacco companies from America sent tons of Lucky Strike and Camel cigarettes to soldiers for free, providing themselves with a huge stream of regular customers in the post-war years. As a result, almost all of the men who went through the war became addicted to nicotine. The exception was the soldiers of Nazi Germany, as Hitler was a teetotaler, a non-smoker, and a vegetarian. He also imposed smoking restrictions on German soldiers, giving them 6 cigarettes a day. Soldiers who smoked received rations of sweets, and lectures were given to soldiers about the dangers of smoking. After Germany's defeat in World War II, many American tobacco companies re-entered the German market, and those who opposed smoking were silenced, and tobacco use increased again among the population. Some of you still remember the days when you could smoke not only in your home or toilet, but also in restaurants, elevators, clubs, and even airplanes. Now the governments of many countries have realized the magnitude of the problem of nicotine addiction and are fighting it. Anti-tobacco campaigns are expressed in the availability of information about the dangers of smoking, a ban on putting tobacco on store shelves, the complete absence of advertising of tobacco products and fines. The biggest fines for violating tobacco laws face smokers in Ireland, €3,000, and the smallest in India, only €2. According to new European standards, at least 65% of each cigarette pack must be covered with a scary picture and a warning sign about the consequences of smoking. Many countries have a total ban on smoking in public places and any advertising of tobacco products. Cigarettes are not sold to minors, and excise taxes are constantly increasing. One of the toughest restrictions were imposed by the authorities of Singapore, declaring it a smoke-free zone. Restaurants, clubs, outdoor markets, and parking lots are no smoking zones. Only one printed pack of cigarettes can be brought into the country. The rest must be declared, and a customs duty must be paid. But even if you manage to take more cigarettes across the border, there is an unpleasant surprise waiting for you in Singapore itself. All Singapore cigarettes must be marked with a DPC, which means that the cigarette has been legally imported into Singapore and duty has been paid. If a policeman does not see this marking on your cigarette, you will have to pay a hefty fine. The Kingdom of Bhutan in Asia believes that smoking spoils one's karma, so they banned smoking in public places in the 17th century. And since 2004, they completely banned selling cigarettes to the local population. Violating this law can land you in jail. It is allowed to bring cigarettes from another country, but not more than 200 pieces, and be sure to pay duty. You can only smoke if you have a receipt confirming your purchase. The country with the lowest percentage of smokers in the world is Sweden. The fight against smoking is conducted here long time ago and consistently. For example, state companies encourage employees who quit smoking and reward them with cash bonuses. And now the authorities want to reach a new goal, to make sure that by 2050 there will be no smokers at all in Sweden. To do this, they want to completely ban the sale of cigarettes to young people. In the United States, every state develops its own rules to regulate smoking. For example, in California, you cannot even walk down the street with cigarettes. And in Florida, you can smoke in bars. New York has a cigarette tax that is twice the national average. And Indiana officially bans smoking to monkeys and giving cigarettes to these animals. If we take an ordinary pack of cigarettes and look at the composition, we see the content of nicotine and carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide. Everything is more or less clear. Of course, on a pack of cigarettes is not written that each cigarette contains about 70 chemicals and more than 3,500 compounds. Obviously not healthy. Let's look at the chemical composition of cigarettes in more detail. Modern tobacco technology is very different from what it was in the 19th century. Now even things that used to be considered waste are added to the cigarette. For example, tobacco vein, which is the middle coarse part of the tobacco leaf that has no flavor or aroma. The paper used to make the sleeve is impregnated with saltpeter so that the cigarette does not go out in pauses when a person takes a drag. Cigarette paper is also treated with chlorine to bleach it. Ammonia is added to the tobacco to make it smoke better. And that's just the composition of cigarettes. The next step is the products of combustion, which are formed when heated and get into the body. These are zinc, lead, and even polonium. Manufacturers, pursuing economic goals, use various tricks so that cigarettes are smoked faster and easier to store and transport. The World Health Organization claims that one person dies every 6 seconds worldwide from smoking-related illnesses. On average, a cigarette is said to shorten one's life by 14 minutes, and people who smoke die 10 years earlier than non-smokers. However, of course, there are many exceptions where heavy smokers live to a ripe old age. Nevertheless, it is absolutely certain that smoking has a devastating effect on most people. Let's take a look at exactly how cigarettes affect the body. I won't scare you with scary diseases that everyone knows. I'll just explain how smoking affects the body. Why do long-term smokers have yellow teeth, bad breath, and an unhealthy complexion? Nicotine tars are quite aggressive substances. They affect tooth enamel, staining it yellow. Smoking affects the cardiovascular system of the body and provokes diseases such as heart attacks and hypertension. Harmful substances, in particular carbon dioxide, interfere with the flow of oxygen into the blood, causing the narrowing of blood vessels, which leads to hypoxia, oxygen deprivation. This increases the heart rate and blood pressure, which can lead to arterial hypertension. Tars and tobacco smoke are deposited in the upper lungs and bronchi, disrupting the alveoli and causing respiratory failure. Improper functioning of the respiratory system leads to the development of obstructive lung disease, bronchial asthma, and complicates the course of respiratory diseases. The nervous system after smoking a cigarette is subjected to excessive stress. First it gets excited and then it gets depressed, so the person becomes excessively irritable. Dizziness, headaches, and increased fatigue are characteristic of a long history of smoking. Smoking also affects the endocrine and reproductive systems. In men, it threatens with erectile dysfunction and low fertility, and in women, with hormonal malfunctions and fertility problems. By far the most common way to use tobacco is by smoking it. However, it is by no means the only way. Thousands of years ago, ancient Indians chewed tobacco instead of smoking it. They rolled up tobacco leaves and put them in their mouths, where they held them for several hours. Slowly chewing tobacco allowed nicotine to enter the bloodstream through the mouth, having a tonic effect. Chewing tobacco was common in Europe and the United States in the 18th and 19th centuries. It was available in dried form in packs, and people chewed it like the Indians. For chewing tobacco, special containers were invented into which they spit their saliva as they chewed. Unlike smokers, tobacco chewers did not need ashtrays. Another way to use tobacco was snuff. Tobacco leaves are crushed to a fine dust, and a pinch of such tobacco is inhaled through the nose. The effect of such tobacco comes in a few minutes and lasts about half an hour. However, it strongly irritates the mucous membrane of the nose, which causes a constant flow of snot and runny nose in inveterate smokers. In literary works of the past, you can find references by authors to how nasty people sniffing tobacco looked, especially if they were women. In today's world, this type of tobacco is also sold, but it is not very popular. There is also such a thing as snus, which are sachets similar to tea bags, but filled with tobacco treated in a special way. They are put behind the lips and held there for a long time. The tobacco is impregnated with saliva, after which the nicotine enters the bloodstream. Snus appeared and is produced in Sweden. In this country, every fourth adult man uses it in spite of the fact that Sweden is the most non-smoking country in Europe. It is interesting that selling snus in the European Union is prohibited everywhere except Sweden. Snus packets are usually intended for single use, but many people keep them in their mouths for a while, then take them out and put them back in the box, then put them back in their mouths. This is especially common among teenagers. The most unusual way to use tobacco is through tobacco enemas. In the 17th and 18th centuries in Europe, drowned people were rescued in this way. The person was taken out of the water and used a special tube to blow tobacco smoke through his anus. For some reason, it was believed that this procedure helped the person regain his breath. Nazi Germany pioneered many of the methods now used by governments around the world to combat tobacco. The anti-tobacco campaign was based on Hitler's personal aversion to tobacco, and was associated with racism, anti-Semitism, and concern for the health of the nation. In his youth, Adolf Hitler was a heavy smoker who smoked up to 40 cigarettes a day. He gave up smoking in order to save money, which he needed and wanted to buy butter for his sandwiches instead of cigarettes. He recalls it as follows: "I soon threw the cigarettes into the Danube and never touched them again." Hitler was the first statesman who vehemently opposed smoking and pursued a vigorous anti-smoking policy in Germany. Scientific studies on the effects of cigarettes were conducted at the highest level by doctors of the Third Reich. They were the first to find evidence that smoking was associated with heart and lung disease, and often caused heart attacks. Reproductive policies were pursued based on the research in the country. The leadership of Nazi Germany was interested in German women giving birth to many healthy children. It was believed that women who smoked grew old earlier, so they were not fit to be German wives and mothers. Smoking during pregnancy led to stillbirths, and the milk of women who smoked contained nicotine. Mass propaganda was expressed in articles about the dangers of smoking, which were published by well-known publications. Posters and leaflets with similar information about the negative effects of tobacco were widespread. Films promoting against female smoking were shown in cinemas. At the same time, laws were published which restricted smoking in public places, medical facilities, streetcars, and buses where people used to smoke. This was done on the personal orders of Hitler, who was convinced that female conductors working in these public transports were exposed to the effects of passive smoking. It was strictly forbidden to smoke in schools, and for those under the age of 18. In 1941, tobacco taxes increased to 80 or even 95% of the price of a pack. Nazi ideology played a large role in the program, based on the belief that smoking tobacco promoted racial degeneration. Germany claimed that smoking was a vice spread by Jews. Jews were accused of bringing tobacco into Germany and of controlling the tobacco industry. Although Hitler's anti-smoking program was controversial in some places, he was successful. And in 1944, cigarette consumption among the German population decreased. Nicotine addiction has two aspects: physical and psychological. Physical addiction to cigarettes is formed when nicotine interferes with the body's natural processes. There is a need to regularly compensate for its lack and inject nicotine from outside. After receiving a dose, there is temporary relief, but after a while the nicotine level in the blood decreases, and the person again feels the need to smoke. Physical dependence can go through several stages. The first stage is for novice smokers who smoke 1 or 2 cigarettes a month, but are already at risk. In the second stage, the addiction is already formed, but the person still thinks he or she can quit at any time. In the third stage of addiction, the need and nicotine hunger are pronounced. The fourth stage is characterized by smoking 1 cigarette after another, and the development of a persistent psychological dependence, when a person is sure that he cannot give up cigarettes. It is believed that women find it more difficult to quit smoking than men, precisely because of the psychological addiction. The psyche of women is more susceptible and vulnerable, so addiction to psychoactive substances appears easier and faster than in men. Another factor influencing the female addiction to smoking is the specific hormonal background. Women are more susceptible to stress and depression, which may provoke a desire to smoke again. Psychological dependence on smoking is not related to the biochemistry of the body, but is at the level of emotions, feelings, and behavior. Smoking can become a ritual and a way to cope with problems or discomfort in communication, such as at work, where many people go to smoke together. Addiction is especially noticeable when cigarettes run out and withdrawal syndrome occurs, accompanied by discomfort, nervousness, and a willingness to do anything to smoke. The problem with the psychological addiction of smokers is that they are ready to quit smoking, but put it off until tomorrow or from Monday. As the American writer Mark Twain said, "There is nothing easier than quitting smoking. I've done it hundreds of times." Today I have this question for you. Do you smoke? If so, for how long? And if you quit, tell me about it in the comments. I read them, and they help a lot in promoting videos. Next, I suggest you watch my videos. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to get notifications of new videos. Bye!